He looked at her with cold, dead eyes and said, "You don't fit in my world anymore, Adele. I need someone who looks the part." James thought he had won the game of life. He had the looks, the top executive job at the city's biggest conglomerate, and a stunning new mistress on his arm. He thought dragging his dowdy ex-wife through a divorce would be the final step in his ascent to power. But James made a fatal calculation. He didn't know that the world he was so desperate to join actually belonged to the woman he just threw away. Tonight, at the Sapphire Gala, the doors are going to open, and James is about to learn that the quiet woman he underestimated holds the keys to his destruction. This is the story of ultimate regret. The sound of the fountain pen scratching against the paper was the only noise in the expansive, sterile boardroom of Sterling Vance International. James Thorne signed his name with a flourish, the expensive gold nib of his Mont Blanc pen catching the light. He didn't look up. He simply slid the divorce papers across the mahogany table toward the woman sitting opposite him. "It's generous, Adele," James said, his voice smooth, lacking any trace of the 7 years they had spent together. "The alimony is more than enough for you to move back to, wherever it is you're comfortable. Maybe back to Idaho? Or was it Ohio? I never could remember." Adele sat quietly. She wore a simple grey cardigan and no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a loose, somewhat messy bun. To the outside world, she looked like exactly what James said she was, a plain, unambitious housewife who had ridden the coattails of a rising star. She picked up the papers. Her hands didn't tremble. "It's Iowa, James," she said softly, "and I don't want the alimony. I just want the dog." James laughed, a short, barking sound of disbelief. "The dog? That mutt? Fine. Take it. I'm doing a full remodel of the penthouse anyway. Jessica is allergic to dog hair." The name hung in the air like toxic smoke. Jessica. Adele looked up, her green eyes unreadable. "So, you're moving her in already? The ink isn't even dry, James." James stood up, adjusting his bespoke Italian suit. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. He felt like a titan. At 32, he was the regional director of Sterling Vance, the most powerful logistics and tech conglomerate in the Northern Hemisphere. "Let's be real, Adele," James said, looking at his reflection rather than her. "We've been over for years. You're simple. You like gardening and reading paperbacks. I'm about to become the youngest CEO in the company's history once Old Man Sterling retires next month. I need a partner who can walk a red carpet, not someone who worries about composting." He turned back to her, a sneer curling his lip. "Tomorrow is the Sapphire Gala. It's the night the board announces the new successor. I'm taking Jessica. She's a model, Adele. She speaks 3 languages. She fits the image. You were a placeholder." It was a cruel, unnecessary strike. Adele stood up slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at him with an expression that James mistook for defeat, but was actually pity. "You think image is everything, James," she whispered. "You've spent so much time climbing the ladder, you never bothered to check who owns the wall it's leaning against." "Spare me the cryptic fortune cookie nonsense," James waved his hand dismissively. "Sign the papers. Get out. Security will escort you." Adele signed. She left the ring on the table, a modest diamond he had bought her when he was a nobody. She walked out of the glass doors, her posture straight, her stride silent. James grabbed the ring and tossed it into the trash bin. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Jessica, baby, it's done. She's gone. Get ready. Tomorrow night, we rule the city." But as James stared out at the city lights, he had no idea that the simple woman who just left the building wasn't going back to a small apartment. She was getting into a black town car, waiting 3 blocks away, occupied by the most powerful legal team in New York. Adele sat in the back of the armored Cadillac Escalade, finally allowing a single tear to roll down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of heartbreak. It was a tear of mourning for the man James used to be. "Are you okay, Miss Vance?" the driver asked, looking in the rearview mirror. It was Thomas, her father's head of security, a man who had known her since she was 6. "I'm fine, Thomas," Adele said, her voice changing. The softness evaporated, replaced by a steely, educated cadence. "Did you bring the file?" "On the seat beside you, Ma'am." Adele opened the leather folder. Inside was the quarterly audit of Sterling Vance International. The world knew her as Adele Thorne, the quiet housewife. But her birth name was Adele Sterling Vance. She was the only daughter of Arthur Sterling, the billionaire founder of the company James worked for. 7 years ago, she had wanted to escape the shadow of her father's empire. She wanted to know if someone could love her for her, not her billions. She had met James in a coffee shop. He was struggling, ambitious, and seemingly kind. She had used her mother's maiden name, Vance, and pretended to be a freelance editor. She had fallen in love. She had married him. And from the shadows, she had paved his road to success. Every promotion James got, Adele had whispered to her father to look at his file. Every major deal James closed. Adele had secretly advised him on the strategy, playing it off as intuition over dinner. She had built him, and he had just discarded her because he thought she wasn't elite enough. Her phone buzzed. It was a private number. "Hi, Dad," Adele answered. "Did he sign?" Arthur Sterling's voice was a low rumble. He was a man who could crash stock markets with a frown, but he had a soft spot for his daughter. "He did," Adele said. "He let me keep the dog." "The fool," Arthur grunted. "Does he know?" "No. He thinks I'm moving to Iowa. He told me I don't fit his world." "His world?" Arthur let out a dry, terrifying laugh. "He's living in a cardboard box inside your world, honey. Listen, I'm tired of this charade. The board is expecting the announcement tomorrow. I was going to give him the CEO spot because you asked me to, despite his arrogance. But now?" "Now," Adele said, closing the file. "We go with Plan B." "And what is Plan B?" Adele looked out the window as the car passed a billboard featuring one of James's recent ad campaigns. "Plan B is that I stop hiding. He wants a woman who can walk the red carpet. He wants someone who commands respect. I'll show him exactly what that looks like." "You're coming to the gala," Arthur said, delight in his voice. "I'm not just coming, Dad. I'm hosting it. It's time the placeholder took her proper seat at the table. Make sure security knows not to let James in through the VIP entrance. If he wants to be elite, let's see if he can survive the shark tank without me holding his hand." "And the mistress?" Arthur asked. "Let her come," Adele said coldly. "I need a witness." She hung up. She pulled the pins out of her hair, letting the golden waves fall over her shoulders. She wiped the modest lipstick off her face. The simple housewife was dead. The heiress had returned. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was transformed into a shimmering ocean of blue and silver. This was the Sapphire Gala, the most exclusive corporate event of the year. Senators, tech moguls, and A-list celebrities mingled under chandeliers that cost more than most houses. At 7:30 p.m., a sleek red Ferrari pulled up to the valet. James stepped out, looking every bit the movie star. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo, custom-made on Savile Row. On his arm was Jessica. Jessica was undeniably beautiful, in a loud, flashy way. She wore a dress that was cut too low and slit too high, covered in sequins that caught the light aggressively. She was 23, a chaotic mix of ambition and naivety. "Oh my God, James," she squealed, snapping a selfie with the red carpet in the background. "Look at this place. We are totally the hottest couple here." "Act like you belong, Jess," James muttered, checking his reflection in the car window. "Tonight is about power. I need to find Arthur Sterling. Once I shake his hand, the CEO position is mine." They walked up the stairs. James handed his invite to the doorman with a smirk. "James Thorne, Regional Director, +1. The doorman, an older man with white gloves, scanned the list. He paused. He frowned. "Is there a problem?" James asked, his patience instantly fraying. "Mr. Thorne, yes, you're not on the VIP list." James felt a flush of heat on his neck. "Excuse me, I'm the keynote speaker's favorite for the new role. Check again." "I have you on the general admission list, sir," the doorman said, politely but firmly. "Side entrance, please. The main doors are reserved for board members and the Sterling family." Jessica giggled nervously. "James, that's embarrassing. Why are we in the cheap line?" "It's a clerical error," James hissed, grabbing her arm tightly. "Come on. I'll fire this guy tomorrow." They walked around to the side entrance, squeezing past mid-level managers and suppliers. James was fuming. This wasn't how his coronation was supposed to begin. Once inside, however, his confidence returned. The room was spectacular. Waiters circulated with glasses of Dom Perignon. James spotted Julian, the CFO of the company. He steered Jessica toward him. "Julian, good to see you," James beamed, extending a hand. Julian, a man in his 50s who knew where the bodies were buried, looked at James with a strange expression. It was a mix of confusion and second-hand embarrassment. "James," Julian nodded, not taking the hand. "I didn't think you'd be here tonight, considering." "Considering what?" James laughed. "The divorce? Old news, Julian. Dead weight is gone. Meet Jessica." Jessica waved, her gum chewing, slightly audible. "Hi, love your tie." Julian looked at Jessica, then back to James. "Right. Well, enjoy the evening, James. It's going to be memorable." Julian hurried away. "Weird guy," Jessica said, grabbing a champagne flute. "He's just jealous," James said, scanning the room. "Where is Arthur Sterling? The old man usually makes an entrance by now." The lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The room went silent. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of Sterling Vance International, Mr. Arthur Sterling." The crowd erupted in applause. James clapped harder than anyone, whispering to Jessica, "Watch this. He's going to call me up in 10 minutes." Arthur Sterling walked onto the stage. He was 70, but he moved with the vigor of a boxer. He adjusted the microphone. "Thank you," Arthur said. "Tonight is a night of change. For 40 years I have steered this ship. But the time has come for new blood. New vision." James nudged Jessica. "Here it comes." "But before I announce the new CAO," Arthur continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, landing briefly on the back corner where James stood, "I want to introduce you to the person who has actually been running the strategy of this company from the shadows for the last 5 years. The person who designed the Asia acquisition. The person who saved us from the tech bubble crash." James frowned. He had executed the Asia acquisition, but he hadn't designed it. He remembered bringing the paperwork home and complaining about it, and Adele staying up all night fixing the numbers. "Please welcome," Arthur's voice boomed, "my daughter and the majority shareholder of Sterling Vance, Ms. Adele Sterling Vance." The double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. James dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing onto Jessica's shoes, but he didn't notice. At the top of the stairs stood a woman. She wasn't wearing a grey cardigan. She was wearing a custom emerald green gown that hugged every curve, dripping in diamonds that made Jessica's sequins look like plastic. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of gold. Her makeup was sharp, fierce, and perfect. It was Adele, and she was looking directly at him. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the gentle clinking of silverware and the murmur of polite conversation. Every eye was fixed on the staircase, but none were as wide or as terrified as James Thorne's. Adele descended the marble steps with the grace of a queen, returning to claim a stolen throne. The emerald silk of her gown flowed around her like liquid money, the slit in the skirt revealing legs that James had ignored for years, now accentuated by strappy diamond heels that cost more than his car. But it wasn't the dress, or the jewels, or the hair. It was her eyes. They were scanning the crowd, cool and predatory. When they locked onto James, she didn't flinch. She didn't look away in shame as she usually did when he criticized her outfit or her cooking. She held his gaze, and for the first time in his life, James felt small. He felt like an insect under a magnifying glass, about to be burned. "James!" Jessica tugged on his sleeve, her voice shrill and confused. "James, isn't that your ex-wife? The one from the cornfields?" James couldn't speak. His throat felt like it was filled with sawdust. He tried to formulate a sentence, a rational explanation, but his brain was short-circuiting. Adele? A Sterling? It's impossible. He replayed their entire marriage in his head in the span of a second. The way she never talked about her family. The way she smiled vaguely when he bragged about meeting the big boss, Arthur Sterling. The way she always urged him to sign prenuptial agreements that kept their assets separate. She wasn't protecting my money, he realized with a sick lurch of his stomach. She was protecting hers. Adele reached the bottom of the stairs. Arthur Sterling, the man James had spent 5 years trying to impress, walked over to her. He didn't shake her hand. He kissed her on the cheek and offered her his arm. The affection was genuine, warm, a stark contrast to the terrifying, icy demeanor Arthur usually showed his employees. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur said, his voice amplified by the microphone. "I apologize for the deception over the years. My daughter wished to make her own way in the world, to understand life without the filter of extreme wealth. She wanted to know who she could trust. And tonight, I believe she has her answer." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. People turned to look at James. He could feel their eyes, judging, laughing, pitying. "No," James whispered. The denial was rising in him, a desperate, clawing thing. "This is a joke. It's a prank." He dropped Jessica's arm. "Stay here." "Where are you going?" Jessica hissed, grabbing his bicep. "Everyone is looking at us, James. You have champagne on your shoes." "Shut up!" James snapped, shoving her hand away. He began to push through the crowd. He had to get to the stage. He had to fix this. He was James Thorne. He was the golden boy. He could charm his way out of anything. If Adele was a Sterling, that meant he was a Sterling by marriage. Technically, the divorce papers were signed, but were they filed? Maybe he could claim duress. Maybe he could win her back right now. He elbowed past a senator and a tech billionaire. "Excuse me, coming through, family business." He reached the edge of the low stage just as Adele took the microphone from her father. She looked out at the sea of faces, her expression serene. "Thank you, Father," she said. Her voice was different, too. Gone was the soft, apologetic tone she used at home. This voice was trained, resonant, commanding. "It is a pleasure to finally introduce myself properly. For 7 years I have lived among you as Adele Thorne. I have watched how this company operates from the ground floor up. I have seen who works for the good of the firm and who works only for the good of their own ego. James scrambled up the side steps of the stage. A security guard moved to intercept him, but Adele held up a hand. "It's all right, Thomas," she said into the mic. "Let him come." James stumbled onto center stage, the bright lights blinding him. He looked deranged next to her perfection, sweaty, red-faced, with wine stains on his shoes. "Adele!" he panted, forcing a smile that looked more like a rictus of terror. He reached for her hand, but she took a smooth step back. "James," she said, her voice amplified through the ballroom, "you're interrupting my speech." "Baby, please," James said, lowering his voice, trying to create an intimate bubble in front of 500 people. "What is this? Why didn't you tell me? We're husband and wife. We're a team. I didn't mean what I said yesterday. The stress of the promotion. You know how I get." Adele looked at him with an expression of mild curiosity, as if he were a particularly interesting bacteria in a petri dish. She didn't turn the microphone away. Every word was being broadcast. "You didn't mean it?" Adele asked, raising an eyebrow. "You didn't mean that I was plain? That I was a placeholder? That I didn't fit in your world?" The crowd gasped. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "I was angry," James pleaded, sweating profusely now. "Adele, look at us. Think about what we can do. You're a sterling. I'm the regional director. Together we can rule this city. I love you, Adele. You know I love you." "You love me?" Adele repeated. She turned to the audience. "He says he loves me." Then she pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the room, directly at the red-faced girl in the sequined dress standing by the buffet. "Then who is Jessica?" The spotlight swung violently across the room, landing on Jessica. She froze, a shrimp canapé halfway to her mouth. She looked like a deer in headlights. "That's," James stammered. She's an intern. I was mentoring her." "Mentoring her?" Adele laughed, and it was a cold, sharp sound. "James, you moved her into our penthouse 3 hours ago. You threw my dog's bed in the trash to make room for her yoga mat." The crowd erupted. Laughter, shock, booing. It was a coliseum, and James was the gladiator with no sword. "Adele, let's talk about this in private," James hissed, his charm failing, his anger surfacing. "You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing the company." "I am the company, James," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "And you are trespassing." James stiffened. "I work here. I am the top executive in this room." "Are you?" Adele turned to her father. "Dad, did we sign the Q4 personnel restructuring forms?" Arthur Sterling stepped forward, pulling a document from his tuxedo jacket pocket. "I have them right here." "Excellent," Adele said. She looked back at James. "You see, James, tonight isn't just a gala. It's a performance review, and I'm afraid you've failed." James felt the floor tilting beneath him. "What are you talking about?" "You think you earned your success," Adele said, stepping closer to him, her heels clicking on the stage. "But let's look at the record. The logistics deal of 2023. You wanted to buy the fleet. I told you to lease the shipping containers. You saved $40 million because I did the math while you were playing golf." James's face went pale. "That's private spousal conversation." "The merger with Omnicorp?" Adele continued, relentless. "You wanted to settle for 12%. I told you to hold out for 18% because I knew, from my father, that they were desperate. I wrote your negotiation script, James. I typed it out for you while you were tired and watching football." "Stop it," James whispered. "Every major success you have had in the last 5 years was me," Adele announced to the room. I was the architect. You were just the face. And frankly, the face has become tired. She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. There is a rumor that tonight a new CEO would be announced. That rumor is true. James puffed out his chest. Despite everything, a tiny, delusional part of him thought, maybe she'll still give it to me, to keep me close. She needs me. The board and I have voted, Adele said. The new CEO of Sterling Vance International is me. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation. James stood there, his hands hanging limp at his sides, watching his wife, his ex-wife, accept the adoration that he believed was his birthright. But Adele wasn't done. She raised a hand for silence. However, she said, looking at James, we have a vacancy for regional director. Since Mr. Thorne has demonstrated a lack of judgment, integrity, and basic intelligence, he is hereby relieved of his duties, effective immediately. You can't fire me, James screamed, his voice cracking. I have a contract. I have a severance package. I'll sue you for everything you're worth. Adele smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who has already eaten the sheep. Oh, James, she sighed. You really should have read the divorce papers before you signed them yesterday. Specifically, page 42, paragraph C. The mention of page 42 hung in the air like a guillotine blade. James stared at her. What? You were so eager to get rid of me, Adele explained, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where the press photographers were now flashing their cameras like a lightning storm. You were so desperate to clear the decks for Jessica that you didn't read the non-compete and conduct clause I added to the settlement. She signaled to the large screen behind the stage. The tech team, clearly prepped for this moment, projected a PDF of the document James had signed less than 24 hours ago. There was his signature, sloppy, arrogant, rushed. Let me read it for you, Adele said, turning to look at the screen. In the event that the signatory, James Thorne, engages in acts of public infidelity or conduct detrimental to the reputation of the Sterling family prior to the finalization of the decree, all severance, stock options, and bonuses are forfeited. Furthermore, the signatory acknowledges that any intellectual property or business strategies developed during the marriage remain the sole property of the spouse, Adele Sterling Vance. The room went silent. You signed away your stocks, James, Adele said softly. You signed away your bonus. You even signed away the rights to the projects you claimed were yours. You have nothing. You leave this company with exactly what you brought into this marriage, your ego and a cheap suit. James felt his knees give way. He actually staggered. This is entrapment. It's business, Adele corrected him. You always said business was about survival of the fittest. You just didn't realize you were the prey. She turned to the security guards. Thomas, please escort Mr. Thorne off the premises and take his company phone and car keys. Those are Sterling Vance property. Thomas, the burly driver who had comforted Adele earlier that day, stepped onto the stage. He didn't look like a driver anymore. He looked like an enforcer. He grabbed James by the arm, not gently. Let go of me, James shouted, thrashing. I'm a VIP. I'm the director. Move, Mr. Thorne, Thomas grunted, dragging him toward the stairs. As James was hauled down the steps, stumbling and nearly falling, he looked frantically into the crowd for an ally. He saw Julian, the CFO. Julian, do something. Tell them how much money I made for this company. Julian took a sip of his champagne and deliberately turned his back on James, striking up a conversation with a potted plant. James scanned the room for Jessica. Jessica will stand by me, he thought desperately. She loves me. We have a connection. He spotted her near the exit. She was frantically typing on her phone. As James was dragged closer, she looked up. "Jess!" James yelled. "Jess, call a lawyer! Get the car!" Jessica looked at James, sweaty, disgraced, fired, and broke. Then she looked up at Adele on the stage, powerful, rich, and triumphant. Jessica put her phone in her purse. She didn't step forward. She stepped back. "I don't think so, James," she said, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "You told me you were the CEO. You told me she was crazy. I don't date liars or losers." She turned on her heel and walked out the door, the sequins on her dress flashing like a warning sign. "Jessica!" James screamed. The humiliation was total. The security guards didn't drag him out the side door this time. They marched him right down the center aisle, past the rows of people he had sneered at for years. He saw the faces of secretaries he had yelled at, junior associates he had stolen credit from, and rivals he had mocked. They were all smiling. Some were even recording with their phones. Thomas shoved James through the main doors of the Pierre Hotel and onto the cold pavement of Fifth Avenue. "My coat!" James sputtered, shivering in the night air. "I left my coat at the coat check." "Consider it a donation to the foundation," Thomas said, standing in the doorway like a bouncer at the gates of heaven. "And Mr. Thorne?" James looked up, tears of rage and shock stinging his eyes. "If you ever come near Miss Adele or the Sterling building again," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper, "I won't be calling the police. I'll be handling it personally. Do you understand?" James nodded, terrified. Thomas reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, crumpled object and tossed it at James. It landed in a puddle at his feet. It was the Mont Blanc pen James had used to sign the divorce papers. "You might need this to fill out unemployment forms," Thomas said. The heavy glass doors slammed shut. James Thorne stood alone on the sidewalk. The gala was raging inside. He could hear the music and the applause for his wife. His Ferrari was parked with the valet, but he realized with a sinking heart that he didn't have the ticket, or the keys, or the money to pay the valet. He had nothing. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted from shock to celebration. The dead weight had been cut loose, and the true leader had emerged. Adele stood on the stage, her hand trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid," Arthur whispered. "You did good." Adele looked out at the crowd. She saw respect. She saw awe, but she felt a strange hollowness. Revenge, she realized, was a dish best served cold, but it didn't fill you up. She took the microphone one last time. "Thank you," she said. "Now let's get to work. We have a lot of cleaning up to do." As the band struck up a jazz number and the waiters began serving the main course, Adele walked off the stage. She needed air. She needed a moment to breathe before the board members descended on her. She walked toward the balcony doors, signaling to Thomas that she wanted to be alone. He nodded and stood guard at the entrance. Adele stepped out onto the stone balcony overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars. She took a deep breath of the cool air, closing her eyes. It was over. The lie was over. James was gone. "Quite a show, Mrs. Thorne. Or should I say, Ms. Sterling." The voice came from the shadows of the balcony corner. It was deep, smooth, and laced with a dangerous kind of amusement. Adele spun around, her hand instinctively going to her throat. She hadn't realized anyone else was out here. A man stepped into the light. He was tall, taller than James, with broad shoulders that strained against a tuxedo that was blacker than the night. He had dark hair, a sharp jawline, covered in a day's worth of stubble, and eyes that were the color of steel. He held a lit cigarette in one hand, though he didn't seem to be smoking it. Adele recognized him instantly, and her blood ran cold. It was Gabriel the Wolf Moretti. If James was a corporate shark, Gabriel was the Leviathan. He was the head of the Moretti Syndicate, a family that ran the construction unions, the shipping docks, and half the politicians in New York. He was a man her father had strictly forbidden her to ever do business with. He was dangerous, he was lethal, and he was currently smiling at her. "Mr. Moretti," Adele said, her voice steady despite her heart hammering against her ribs. "This is a private party. I don't believe you were on the guest list." "I don't do lists, Bella," Gabriel said, taking a slow step toward her. He tossed the cigarette over the balcony rail. "I came to see the coronation, and I must say, watching you dissect that poor excuse for a man was the most entertaining thing I've seen in a decade." "What do you want?" Adele asked, backing up until her waist hit the stone railing. Gabriel stopped. He was close enough that she could smell him. Expensive scotch, tobacco, and gunpowder. "I want to make a deal," Gabriel said. "We don't do business with criminals," Adele shot back. Gabriel laughed. "Everyone is a criminal, Adele. Some of us just have better tailors. Besides, with your ex-husband gone, you have a vacancy in your logistics department, and I control the docks. You need me." "I don't need anyone," Adele said defiantly. Gabriel leaned in, his face inches from hers. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "You needed a husband who could see you," Gabriel whispered. "James was blind. But I see you, Adele. I saw the fire in you tonight. And I think you and I could burn this whole city down together." Adele felt a flush of heat that had nothing to do with anger. This was dangerous. This was wrong. This was exactly the kind of trouble she should run from. But as she looked into the predator's eyes, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to run. The air on the balcony seemed to vibrate with tension. Adele stared at Gabriel Moretti, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Logic screamed at her to run. This man was a predator, a kingpin whose name was whispered in fear across the 5 boroughs. But instinct, a dark, dormant instinct that had awakened the moment she humiliated James, told her to stay. "You're proposing an alliance," Adele said, her voice steady, though her hands gripped the cold stone railing behind her. "Sterling Vance operates in the light, Mr. Moretti. You operate in the shadows. Oil and water don't mix." Gabriel took a step closer, invading her personal space with deliberate arrogance. He smelled of danger and expensive cologne. "The shipping industry isn't oil and water, Adele. It's blood and money. You know this. Your father knew this. Why do you think your trucks never get hijacked? Why do you think your containers never sit in customs for weeks?" Adele's eyes widened. "My father paid you." "Your father paid tribute," Gabriel corrected smoothly. "A protection fee. But Arthur is old. He's retiring. The wolves are circling, Adele. Without your your ex-husband, you look vulnerable to the market. You need a new dog at the gate, and I'm offering to be the wolf." "And what is the price?" Adele asked, narrowing her eyes. "Because I know you don't do charity." Gabriel smiled, a slow, predatory grin that made her knees weak. "I want legitimacy. I have billions in dirty money, Adele. I need clean ventures. I want a seat on the board. Silent, of course. But equity." "You want to launder money through my company?" Adele accused him. "I want to invest in our future," Gabriel countered. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of golden hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, callous, contrasting with the softness of her skin. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her that was terrifyingly pleasant. "Think about it. James is out there right now. A wounded animal is dangerous. He knows your secrets. He knows your passwords. Who is going to stop him when he tries to burn you down? The police? They take 20 minutes to arrive. I take 2. Adele pulled back, her mind racing. He was right. James was petty, vindictive, and desperate. I'll think about it, she whispered. Don't think too long, Tesoro, Gabriel said, stepping back into the shadows. The storm is coming. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the storm was already brewing in a cheap motel room in Queens. James Thorne sat on the edge of a stained mattress, staring at the wall. He had sold his watch, a Patek Philippe given to him by Arthur Sterling, to a pawn shop for a fraction of its value just to pay for the room and a bottle of cheap whiskey. He took a swig, the liquid burning his throat. The humiliation of the gala played on a loop in his mind. The laughter, the way Jessica had looked at him, the way Thomas had thrown him into the street. They think they can erase me, James muttered, his eyes bloodshot and manic. They think I'm just a placeholder. He reached into his pocket. He didn't have his company phone, but he had a burner phone he used for extracurricular activities. And more importantly, he had his memory. James had been the regional director for 5 years. He didn't know the strategy, but he knew the codes. He knew where the servers were located. He knew the dirty laundry, the offshore accounts, the tax loopholes, the sensitive client lists. He dialed a number. Silas Grant speaking, a voice answered. Silas Grant was the CEO of Omnicorp, Sterling Vance's biggest rival. He was a ruthless corporate raider who had been trying to destroy the Sterling Empire for decades. Mr. Grant, James said, his voice raspy. This is James Thorne. There was a pause. The man of the hour? Silas chuckled darkly. I saw the video of your exit, trending #1 on Twitter. Very dramatic. I can destroy her, James said, cutting to the chase. I know the override codes for the automated logistics grid. I can shut down their entire supply chain for a week. I can freeze their assets. I can give you the blueprint to steal their biggest contract. And why would you do that, James? Silas asked. Because I want to see her beg, James hissed, gripping the bottle until his knuckles turned white. I want $10 million and I want a job at Omnicorp, VP level. Meet me at the shipyard in Brooklyn, Silas said. Warehouse 4, 1 hour. Bring the codes. If they work, you get your money. James hung up. He stood up, splashing some water on his face. He looked in the cracked mirror. He didn't see a loser. He saw a man about to get even. 1 hour later, Adele was sitting in her father's office at the headquarters, staring at the city skyline. The gala was over. The guests had gone home. But she couldn't sleep. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Adele! Gabriel's voice came through, clear and urgent. You have a breach. What? Adele sat up straight. Who is this? It's Gabriel. Listen to me. My men at the docks just spotted a car entering the Omnicorp sector. It's James. Adele felt a chill run down her spine. James? What is he doing there? He's meeting Silas Grant, Gabriel said. Adele, think. What does James have? The override codes, Adele gasped. He never changed them because he was too lazy to memorize new ones. If he gives those to Silas, they can paralyze our fleet. It will cost us billions. It will bankrupt the company by morning. I can stop him, Gabriel said. His voice was devoid of emotion, purely tactical. But if I intervene, there is no going back. We are partners. You owe me. Adele hesitated for only a fraction of a second. She looked at the portrait of her father on the wall, the legacy he built from nothing. She thought of James's smug face when he served her the divorce papers. Do it, Adele said. Stop him. Stay by the phone, Gabriel said. The line went dead. The Brooklyn shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and shipping containers shrouded in fog. James parked the stolen sedan he had hot-wired, a skill he learned in his rebellious youth, and walked toward Warehouse 4. 2 large men in suits were waiting for him. They frisked him, took the burner phone, and led him inside. Silas Grant was sitting on a wooden crate, flanked by 3 more bodyguards. He looked like a vulture in a tuxedo. "Mr. Thorne?" Silas smiled. "You look terrible." "Cut the small talk," James spat. "Do you have the money?" "I have a transfer ready," Silas said, tapping a tablet. "But first, the codes," James recited the sequence from memory. Alpha 7 Tango Break 4-4. Authorization, M. Thorne Admin. Silas typed it in. He watched the screen. Green lights flashed. Access granted. "Incredible," Silas laughed. "We're in. I have control of the Sterling fleet. I can reroute every ship to Antarctica if I want." "The money," James demanded, extending a shaking hand. Silas looked at him with pity. James, you really are an amateur. You just admitted to corporate espionage and cyber-terrorism in front of witnesses. Why would I pay you when I can just blackmail you?" James's face fell. "We had a deal." "Deals are for equals," Silas sneered. "You are a liability. Boys, get rid of him. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." The bodyguards stepped forward, cracking their knuckles. James backed away, terror seizing his throat. "No, wait! I have more info." "Goodbye, James," Silas said, turning his back. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse exploded, showering the room in sparks and glass. The darkness was instant and absolute. "What is this?" Silas shouted. "Secure the perimeter." Gunshots rang out, short, suppressed bursts. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Silas's bodyguards dropped to the floor, groaning in pain, shot in the kneecaps and shoulders, non-lethal, but incapacitating. A figure emerged from the smoke, illuminated by the headlights of the car outside. It was Gabriel Moretti. He held a suppressed pistol in one hand, relaxed at his side. Behind him stood 6 of his enforcers, armed with assault rifles. "Silas," Gabriel said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, "you're playing with my toys." Silas froze. He knew who Gabriel was. Everyone knew. "Moretti, this has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," Gabriel said, walking forward. He kicked the tablet out of Silas's hand and crushed it under his boot. "You see, Sterling Vance is under my protection now." Gabriel turned his gaze to James, who was cowering behind a stack of pallets. "And you?" Gabriel said softly. "The ex-husband." Gabriel signaled to his men. They grabbed James and dragged him into the center of the room. James was sobbing now, a mess of tears and snot. "Please," James begged. "I didn't mean it. I'll leave town. I'll disappear." Gabriel holstered his gun. He pulled out a phone and put it on speaker. "He's secured, Donna," Gabriel said. Adele's voice filled the warehouse. "Is he hurt?" "Only his pride," Gabriel said, "and his pants are a bit wet." James looked at the phone. Adele, thank God. Save me. These people are crazy. Silas tried to kill me." "I heard, James." Adele's voice was cold, harder than diamond. "I've been listening for 10 minutes. "What?" James blinked. "The burner phone you used," Adele said. "Did you really think I didn't know about it? I bought that phone for you 2 years ago for your fishing trips. It has a tracker and a listening device. I knew you were going to Silas before you even left the motel." James slumped. She was always 10 steps ahead. "Gabriel," Adele said, "let Silas go. He knows the rules. If he tries this again, I'll buy his company and strip it for parts." "Agreed," Gabriel said. He nodded to Silas, who scrambled out of the warehouse without a backward glance. "And James?" Gabriel asked. There was a long silence on the line. James held his breath. "Bring him to the Gala hall," Adele said. "There is one last thing he needs to see." 30 minutes later, James was thrown through the doors of the empty Pierre Hotel ballroom. The cleaning crew was gone. The room was dark, save for one spotlight on the stage. Adele was sitting on a chair in the center of the stage. Gabriel stood behind her, a silent sentinel. But there was someone else there. Standing next to Adele, holding a tablet and looking completely composed, was Jessica. James rubbed his eyes. "Jess? What are you doing here? Get away from her." Jessica looked at him, her face devoid of the ditzy expression she had worn for months. She pushed her glasses up her nose, glasses James had never seen her wear. "Hello, James," Jessica said. Her voice was articulate, sharp, professional. "Or should I refer to you as Subject 402? "Subject what?" James stammered. "Jessica isn't a model, James," Adele said, standing up. She walked to the edge of the stage. "Jessica is a senior forensic accountant and private investigator from London. I hired her 6 months ago." James felt the room spin. "You hired her?" "I suspected you were stealing from the company," Adele explained. "But I needed proof, and I needed to know if your incompetence was deliberate or just natural stupidity. So Jessica went undercover." Jessica stepped forward. "It was quite a difficult role, James. Pretending to be interested in your stories about high school football was the hardest job of my career. But you made it easy. You bragged about the offshore accounts in your sleep. You showed me the hidden ledgers on your laptop to impress me." "It was a honeypot," James whispered, the realization crushing him. "The whole affair, it was a setup." "The affair was your choice, James," Adele said. "Jessica just gave you the opportunity. You dug your own grave. She just handed you the shovel." Adele threw a folder onto the floor in front of him. "That file contains evidence of embezzlement, corporate espionage, and fraud, enough to put you in federal prison for 20 years. James fell to his knees. "Adele, please. I'm family." "No," Adele said. "You were a mistake." She looked at Gabriel. "Give him the choice." Gabriel stepped forward, towering over James. He held out 2 items. In his left hand, a one-way plane ticket to a remote island in Southeast Asia. In his right hand, the phone with the police on speed dial. "Option A," Gabriel rumbled. "You leave tonight. You never return to the US. You never speak the name Sterling or Vance again. You live in a hut and fish for your dinner." "Option B," Adele finished. "We give the file to the FBI. You go to prison. And trust me, James, in prison, you won't be the boss. You'll be the placeholder for someone much worse than me." James looked at the ticket, then at the phone. He looked at the woman he had underestimated, the mistress who had played him, and the mob boss who was now the power behind the throne. He grabbed the ticket. "Good choice," Gabriel said. James stood up, broken. He walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back one last time. "Who are you really, Adele?" he asked, his voice trembling. Adele stood next to Gabriel. The mob boss placed a protective hand on her waist. She didn't pull away. She leaned into it. "I'm the owner," Adele said, "and the house always wins." James walked out into the night, disappearing forever. Adele turned to Gabriel. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted, but exhilarated. "Is it done?" she asked. "The threat is gone," Gabriel said, "but the partnership is just beginning." He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a flask in his jacket. He handed one to her. "To the Queen," Gabriel toasted, his eyes burning with an intensity that promised trouble, passion, and power. Adele clinked her glass against his. A smile played on her lips, not the smile of a housewife, but the smile of a ruler who had found her king. "To the wolf," she replied. They drank, the liquid warm and sharp, as the sun began to rise over a city that was now theirs to rule. And so, James Thorne learned the hardest lesson of his life. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the library. He chased the glitter of a fake life and lost the diamond that was holding him up. Adele didn't just survive, she evolved. She embraced her power, cleared the rot from her life, and found an ally who saw her true worth. Sometimes, the person you discard is the very person holding the keys to your destruction. Wow, what a journey. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and the ultimate power move, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And tell me in the comments, do you think Adele made the right choice, allying with Gabriel, or did she just trade one danger for another? Type Team Adele if you think she's a boss. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.